The wind howled through the Montana Valley like a sorrowful hymn, rattling the loose boards of the weather-beaten chapel as the preacher whispered his final words. The sky, thick with storm clouds, seemed reluctant to release its burden, until the first drop fell squarely on the casket. Silas McGraw didn't flinch. He stood still, weathered hands clenched in front of him, a Stetson pulled low over haunted eyes. The wooden box before him held more than just his wife. It held the last bit of warmth he had left in this world. She'd died slow. Consumption. A cruel kind of fading that stripped her breath, then her voice, and finally her touch. Mara had been everything, the light in the morning, the sound in the silence. Now there was only the groan of trees and the whine of the wind. No mourners had gathered. No hymns sung but the storms. Only the preacher, paid in potatoes and worn-out prayers, muttered his amen and disappeared into the distance. Silas stayed long after. Mud soaked into his boots, but he didn't notice. He just stared down at the grave, eyes red-rimmed but dry. The old ash tree swayed behind him, the one they'd carved their names into 20 years ago. He remembered her laugh. Remembered the way she used to say his name, soft and slow, like it meant something holy. But holiness didn't survive in this land. It burned under the sun or bled out in the dirt. By the time he rode into town a week later, he was a man carved hollow. He spoke little, nodded less, and didn't bother with pleasantries. The general store clerk handed him sugar and nails like one hands a ghost something to carry. No one asked how he was. Everyone knew. That's when he saw the cage. It was lashed to the back of a freight wagon beside crates of fur and jugs of whiskey. Inside it crouched a woman, barefoot, filthy, tangled hair covering half her face. She wore what looked like a man's torn coat and little else. Her eyes were wild, unreadable. Animal eyes. The kind that hadn't known kindness in a long while. Boys whispered she'd been caught up in the mountains by a pair of trappers who swore she ran with wolves. Some said she spoke no English. Others swore she spoke to spirits. Folks called her the Wild Mountain Woman, like naming her was safer than knowing her. Someone joked she bit a man's ear clean off. Silas didn't laugh. He watched her instead, how she didn't flinch when the merchant poked her with a stick. How her eyes never blinked, not even in the sun. How quiet she was. Broken things were often loud at first. Not this one. The auction was impromptu, as these ugly things often were. The law was vague in these parts. Found property could be sold if no one claimed it. No one had. They started the bidding low, just enough to tempt the drunk and the desperate. A man shouted $5. Laughter. Another offered a jug of whiskey. More laughter. Then Silas stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. Just lifted a pouch and dropped it in the dirt. It landed with a solid thud. Gold. The crowd went quiet. Someone muttered, "You buying her to tame her, Silas?" Another voice chuckled, "Or to replace what the cholera took." Silas didn't look their way. He just waited. The merchant shrugged, scooped up the pouch, and unlatched the cage. The woman didn't move. Silas climbed into his wagon, glanced back. She was still crouched. He gave a short nod, then turned the reins. She followed. No leash. No order. Just shadowed him like a feral dog that hadn't decided whether to trust or tear out a throat. The ride back was silent, save for the creak of wheels and the occasional cry of distant hawks. She sat in the back, arms folded tight around her knees. Once, when the wind shifted, he caught the scent of something burned, ash and wild herbs. At the ranch, she stepped down without a word and walked straight past the house toward the barn. Silas didn't stop her. He just watched as she curled up in a pile of hay and wrapped herself in shadows. That night, thunder returned. The roof groaned. Silas sat in his rocker, a lamp casting low light over the hearth. He could feel the space Mara used to fill, like gravity had collapsed on itself. Her chair sat empty. Her sewing things untouched. He'd left everything as it was. Couldn't bear to move them. Couldn't bear not to. He glanced out the window. The barn was dark, but he thought he saw a flicker, firelight, or maybe just his own grief playing tricks. Somewhere in the night, the wind picked up. It rattled the shutters and whispered through the walls. A low sound, almost like his name. He closed his eyes. That voice again, Mara's. He would have sworn to God it was hers. Soft, patient, full of something he hadn't felt in months, hope. He opened his eyes and stared at the flames in the hearth. They danced in patterns he didn't recognize. Then he heard it, a sound outside. Not loud. Just movement. Someone walking barefoot through wet grass. He stood, crossed to the door, and eased it open. She stood there, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to her face. She didn't speak. Just looked up at him like she'd already been waiting. For what, he didn't know. He stepped aside. She didn't enter. He didn't press. When he closed the door, he stood a moment longer, listening to the quiet. Then he whispered into the shadows, almost ashamed at the need in his voice. Don't know who you are. Don't know what you've been through. But this place has got room for ghosts, if you ain't too scared to stay. She was gone by morning, but the firewood was stacked neatly beside the hearth. His boots were cleaned, and an old quilt, the one Mara had stitched, had been draped gently over his sleeping form. Silas sat on the edge of his bed, staring at it. Then he smiled. Just a little. The days rolled forward with the slow rhythm of wounded hearts learning how to beat again. Morning brought frost, and evening wrapped the ranch in a hush so thick, even the owls kept their distance. The woman, silent still, moved like smoke through Silas's world, always present but never quite there. She took to the barn, choosing hay over the house. She bathed in the creek when the sun was low and the wind quiet. She never asked, never looked him in the eye. But she stayed. Silas didn't press her with words. He wasn't a man of many himself, and the ones he'd had once, soft words, laughing ones, died with Mara. Instead, he left small gestures in place of language. A cup of warmed milk left on the porch. A clean shawl folded at the barn door. A battered pair of boots placed just outside her stall. She never said thank you, but the boots disappeared, and the shawl was worn. One morning, Silas noticed the firewood neatly stacked against the cabin wall, a precision in the angles he hadn't mustered in weeks. His axe, dulled for months, was sharp as a knife's edge. She was paying him in silence and service, and in return, he left the barn untouched, her sanctuary. Still, her silence gnawed at him, not out of frustration, but because of what it told him. She didn't trust him, not yet. She wasn't mute, he knew that much. He'd heard her whisper into the night once, guttural sounds that weren't English but carried the weight of memory. He hadn't approached. Just stood by the window, watching the moonlight catch her hair like river water in motion. Then came the storm. It blew in angry, fast, like something unleashed. The roof strained, and the wind tore a shutter clean off. Silas rushed to the barn to check the livestock, but as he reached the doors, a loud crack split the sky. A branch, thick as a man's torso, collapsed with the weight of old age and lightning. It came down fast and heavy, straight on him. Pain came like fire across his ribs. He was pinned, shoulder crushed, breath knocked from his lungs. Rain hammered his face. He tried to shout but managed only a growl. Then she appeared. Soaked, barefoot, eyes wild in the lightning flashes. She didn't hesitate. No fear, no pause. Just grabbed a rusted iron bar from the wall and wedged it under the beam. Her muscles strained, bare feet slipping in the mud. A sound escaped her throat, not a word but something raw and human. The beam shifted. Enough. He rolled free, coughing, clutching his side. She crouched beside him, hands trembling. Then, with surprising gentleness, she tore a strip from her coat and pressed it to the bleeding gash on his head. No ceremony, no fear. Just care. Back in the house, she helped him into bed. Her fingers were calloused but deft. She found his wife's old sewing tin and stitched the wound above his eyebrow. He winced once, just once, and she paused, looking into his eyes as if trying to read something written long ago. That night, she didn't return to the barn. She sat near the hearth, wrapped in the shawl he'd given her, tending the fire. Silas lay in bed, half dreaming through fever and pain. At some point, her voice came through the haze. She was humming. Not just any tune, but the one Mara used to sing when she cooked, when she held their boy, when they danced in the kitchen with mud still on their boots. The sound pierced him, not like a knife, but like a memory long buried, clawing its way back to breath. He said her name, Mara, before he could stop himself. The humming stopped. Morning came soft and pale, with a hint of frost on the windows. Silas stirred, stiff but alive. He shuffled to the table. She sat there already, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. The fire crackled. She looked at him, really looked, and he realized her eyes weren't wild at all. Just tired. He poured them both coffee. She didn't drink it. Just held the mug. He asked her name. She looked away. Then, slowly, she reached into the ash near the hearth and drew with her fingertip. A mountain. A sun. A stick figure, child-size. A line of fire. Silas watched, heart clenching. "You had a boy," he murmured. She nodded once. Another figure. Larger. A cross beside it. She rubbed it away before he could see the rest. He didn't ask again. Later, while he sat sharpening the knife she'd used to dress his wound, he noticed something else on the hearth's edge, his wife's old dress, folded carefully, like a prayer. He turned to ask, but she spoke first. "Mara." His chest went tight. "That was her name, wasn't it?" she asked, voice low, a whisper made of smoke and broken glass. He nodded. "How'd you know?" She didn't answer right away. Just stared into the fire, her eyes flickering. "In the dark," she said finally, "when I thought I'd forgot what human meant. I heard her. Or maybe just wanted to. She told me to follow the cold until it found warmth again." Silas sat down, slow. "What's yours?" he asked. A long pause. Then, "Anna." The name came out like it had cost her everything to say. "Anna." He whispered it back to her, once, like tasting it. She didn't flinch. The rain returned that night, but it was gentle now, less a storm and more a rhythm. He heard her moving in the kitchen, placing things in cupboards that hadn't been touched since Mara died. She moved with care, as though memory had made her a guest and grief had made her family. Silas didn't stop her. Something had shifted. Not like a fire catching, but like a seed stirring beneath frozen soil. Trust was still a long way off. But now, at least, there was a path. Winter pressed in like a slow hand around the throat, tightening a little more each day. Snow came heavy and without apology, blanketing the hills, swallowing the trails, and sealing the valley in a silence deeper than death. The ranch stood like a lonely sentinel in a world gone white. Smoke curled from the chimney, the only sign that something inside still lived. Anna moved through the house like she'd always belonged. Her silence had softened, replaced by short words, quiet nods, and the occasional glance that lingered longer than before. Silas had grown used to her rhythms, how she woke before dawn to boil water, how she paused every time she passed Mara's wedding picture as if reading some secret message from the glass. She still didn't talk much, but when she did, her voice was stronger. Less ghost, more woman. Silas had mended some too. The cracked ribs healed crooked, but they held. He could chop wood again, though slower than before. Most days, they worked in companionable quiet. He'd never known comfort like this, not even with Mara. With Mara, there'd been laughter and light. With Anna, there was something else, something harder earned. Respect forged from pain. Trust born in the silence between two wounded people. But the land remembered violence. And it hadn't finished with them yet. It was early afternoon when the first rider came. Then 2 more. 3 men on tired horses, faces hidden under thick coats and black hats. Anna spotted them from the kitchen window, her jaw tightening. She turned from the glass and murmured, "Don't like the way they ride." Neither did Silas. He stepped out onto the porch, shotgun cradled in one arm. The lead rider raised a hand in mock greeting. "You Silas McGraw," the man called. "Who's a skin?" The rider smiled. "Name's Cullen. My boys and I are looking for a woman. Wild one. Escaped a transport wagon up north few months back. Bit a man's throat out, they say." Silas didn't move. "Don't know her." "Funny," Cullen said, eyeing the barn. "'Cause we was told she came this way. Said some widower with more grief than sense took her in." Anna stepped out behind Silas. She didn't hide. She didn't speak. Just looked at Cullen like he was a rusted blade she'd already bled on. Cullen's grin faded. There she is. Damn. Thought maybe the stories were stretched. But you're just as wild as they said. She's no one's property, Silas said, voice low and sharp. Cullen laughed, mean and hollow. Everything out here belongs to someone, old man. Mountains don't care who you bury. Neither do I. The standoff hung like frost in the air. Then Anna stepped forward. If you come again, she said slowly, her voice sure now, bring more men. You'll need them. Cullen spat. Ain't gonna be next time. We'll take her now. But he didn't draw. Not yet. Something in her eyes gave him pause. Something ancient and cold. Silas raised the shotgun, finger tightening. Cullen backed his horse with a sneer. This ain't over. They rode off, snow kicking behind them like ghost smoke. That night, Silas double-locked every door and window. He kept the shotgun loaded beside the bed. Anna didn't go to the barn. She stayed inside, sitting near the fire with her knees pulled up, staring into the flames. He poured her tea, set it down in front of her. She didn't drink it. Who were they to you? He asked finally. She didn't answer right away. Then, same kind of men who took my son. Silas looked down. They came for him because he was different. Part native, part white. Said he didn't belong to either. Said I didn't either. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. They burned our camp. Took him. Left me to die. He sat beside her, the firelight soft on his weathered face. I'm sorry. Her jaw tightened. He had a name. Elon. Means friendly. He was 7. The silence after was so thick it felt like time itself paused to mourn. She looked at him then, truly looked, and said, You lost her. I know that pain. I see it every time you look at her chair. I see yours too, he said. The next few days passed like the slow loading of a gun. Each sound outside drew their eyes. Each gust of wind made them reach for weapons. Then came the tracks in the snow. Hoof prints. 6 riders now. They circled the property, keeping just out of range. Watching. On the 4th day, Silas laid out every rifle he owned. Anna sharpened the long knife she'd kept hidden beneath the barn floor. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Night fell heavy, moonless and cruel. Just after midnight, the dogs barked. Then came a shot. Silas bolted upright, already grabbing the shotgun. Anna was beside him in a heartbeat. Shouts came from the barn. Wood cracked. Another shot. Someone screamed. They moved like wolves, silent, fast, deadly. Silas took the front window. Anna slipped through the back. In the dark, her movement was fluid, like shadow made flesh. Gunfire lit the yard in bursts. Silas caught one man in the shoulder. Another went down with a cry as Anna appeared from nowhere, her knife finding soft places in thick coats. It wasn't a fair fight. Not for Cullen's men. The last man fled, bleeding and howling into the dark. Cullen lay in the snow, gasping, a rifle inches from his hand. Silas stepped on it before he could reach it. You protectin' her? Cullen hissed. She's a savage. Ain't even human. Anna stood over him, blood on her face, eyes burning. She's more human than you ever were, Silas said. Cullen spat, then choked, the cold claiming him inch by inch. Silas didn't finish him. He didn't have to. The land would. By sunrise, the snow was stained, the silence returned. Anna sat on the porch, wrapped in Mara's quilt, watching the horizon. Silas brought her coffee. She took it this time. And just before he turned to go, she said something soft. So soft he almost didn't hear. Your wife used to hum that song. I heard it once, before I ever came here. Like she was calling me. He stopped. I don't know what it means, she continued. But maybe I was meant to come here. To remember how to live. To protect something again. Silas nodded. Then stay. Her hand found his. Not sudden, not dramatic. Just there. And he let it stay. Spring arrived like a whisper instead of a declaration. Soft winds, thawed soil, and buds peeking through the dead grass. The land, once locked in frost and silence, began to stir. Birds returned in cautious flocks. Streams flowed freely again. And with every sunrise, the valley seemed to take a breath. So did Silas. He and Anna worked side by side now, not just in silence but in rhythm. She plowed the vegetable beds while he repaired the fencing. Their conversations were still sparse, but the quiet no longer felt empty. There was ease in it, even a kind of peace. They cooked meals together, ate across from each other in the kitchen that had once belonged solely to memory. The ghost of Mara didn't vanish, but she no longer loomed. She lingered more gently, less a wound, more a scar. Anna had changed too. The wild edge remained, but it softened at the corners. She no longer flinched at sudden sounds or shied away from open doors. Her hair, once a tangled mane, was now braided most mornings. She still slept light, still kept the knife under her pillow, but her eyes were clearer. Less haunted. More present. Some nights, when the moon was high and the porch cool, they spoke of small things: seeds, weather, mending leather. And once, only once, Anna told him a story. "Elon used to feed the birds," she said, voice steady. "He thought every creature had a spirit. He'd talk to them like they were neighbors." Silas smiled. "Maybe they were." She nodded. "When they took him, I stopped listening. I thought the world had gone deaf." "You think it's listening again?" She looked up at the night sky, then back at him. "I think I can finally hear it again. But peace has a way of drawing fire." Word of the fight with Cullen's men spread faster than the thaw. Ranchers came by under the pretense of trade, their eyes scanning Anna like a curiosity. Some whispered praise. Others, warnings. One man, Jonas Bell, made no attempt to hide his disgust. "She's dangerous, Silas. A woman like that, raised half-wild, trained to kill." "She's free," Silas interrupted, voice low. "That's all." Jonas leaned in. "Men like Cullen don't vanish. They got kin. You brought trouble to this valley." Silas held his stare. It was already here. Just hid behind church bells and clean boots. Jonas spat in the dirt and rode off. That night, Anna sat on the porch steps, sharpening her blade. Silas joined her, holding 2 mugs of warmed cider. She didn't speak, but he could feel the storm behind her eyes. "They'll come?" she asked finally. "Maybe. And you'll stand with me?" He took a breath. "No." She turned sharply, but he wasn't done. "I won't just stand with you. I'll fight for you." "That's different." Her eyes glistened. Not with weakness, but with something deeper. Trust earned and tested. 3 weeks later, the threat came not on horseback, but by fire. It was near midnight when the first flame licked the barn wall. Then another. And another. Shadows moved in the trees, faceless men with torches and rifles. Anna woke first, already pulling on boots, already reaching for her knife. Silas was right behind her. They burst from the cabin as the barn roared to life. "Horses!" he shouted. "They're still inside." Anna didn't hesitate. She vanished into the flames while Silas covered her from behind. Bullets cracked through the dark, but they fired wide, meant to scare, not to kill. A warning. A punishment. She emerged moments later, leading the panicked horses, coughing through smoke. Her dress was scorched, hair singed, but her eyes burned brighter than the fire behind her. Silas raised his rifle. Fired once, twice. A scream echoed through the trees. The shadows scattered like startled wolves. The barn collapsed minutes later, sparks rising into the night like fireflies set loose. By dawn, it was ash. The sheriff came by that morning. Too late, as always. He looked tired, like a man who'd made too many compromises. "You'll rebuild?" he asked quietly. "We will," Silas replied. Anna stood nearby, binding her arm with cloth. She didn't acknowledge the sheriff, and he didn't press her. After he left, Silas turned to her. "We can leave," he said. "Find someplace quieter." She shook her head. "No more running." He nodded slowly. "Then we rebuild." They spent the next week clearing debris. Neighbors offered help, though few met Anna's eyes. A small shed went up first, then the new barn frame. She carved her own mark into the beam above the entrance, a mountain, a flame, a child's handprint. Silas watched her press her palm into the wood. "What's that mean?" he asked. "It means we survived," she said. One morning, weeks later, they stood at the edge of the pasture. The sun rose golden, lighting the fields in fireless flame. Anna reached into her pocket, pulled something out. A small carved bird. "Elon made it," she whispered. "It's the only thing I have of him." She pressed it into Silas's hand. "You keep it now." He held it carefully, reverently. "Are you sure?" She smiled, just slightly, but enough to shift the world. "He'd have liked you," she said. He didn't speak, just wrapped his fingers around the bird like it was the most fragile thing on earth. And then, quietly, she said the words that stopped his heart. Words he hadn't heard since Mara last stood in that very pasture, barefoot and laughing. "Don't forget to close the gate, love." He turned to her slowly. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching the sunrise, but her voice, her tone, was exact. He whispered, "What did you say?" She blinked, unsure. Then her face changed. Realized. "That's what she used to say to you, wasn't it?" He nodded, throat tight. Anna reached for his hand. "I didn't mean to. It just came out." He held her hand gently. "It's all right. Maybe it came from the same place." They stood together in the light, wind brushing their shoulders, the sound of birds overhead. The past wasn't gone. It never would be. But in its shadow, something new had grown. Not a replacement, but a beginning.